Transnet, and we thank them very much for making sure these conversations continue. And joining us today, we have a panel consisting of Minister Nhlanhla Nene, who's the Minister of Finance. Next to him is Razia Khan, who's the Head of Africa Research at Standard Chartered. And Ismail Ibrahim is an analyst who's helping us to unpack a lot of this conversation. And just before the break, we heard from Minister, and he was basically telling us, look, this is a time for action, and everybody has to get involved. We also have Deputy Minister Mcebisi Jonas, who's just joined us, and he's going to be part of the panel in the next hour, so we look forward to having a conversation with him. Minister, I'm going to try and use layman's terms so that they can understand kind of where we are at the moment. All the time we hear from ministers such as you saying we need to save and we shouldn't spend more than we earn. And yet, I guess, citizen government, this is what you've been doing.
Well, that's a very simple equation, Peter. In Zulu, I always say to people, when you, and I'm also a small-scale farmer in my other life. I say when you plant, reach harvest time, you harvest and you set aside what will help you in order to be able to replant when the time comes. So you save the seed, or you prepare stuff that would actually be for the seed. That's how simple this is. NesiZulu sithi uma uvuna ungadli uze udle nembewu. So that's how it works. But as a country, if we do not do that, because this works now in a household environment, but as a country, if you do not save, it means you will have to depend on other people's savings in order to execute your own programs. So other people will send their savings your way, and you will pay them. There is a price for using other people's savings, so you'll have to pay them. I hope that is simple enough. And I'm just trying to be as simple as possible. That's what it happens. And as a result, we've been actually living on borrowed money. But there is nothing wrong also in borrowing, and I did say this yesterday, if you are borrowing to invest.
Right.
But if you are borrowing to consume, then you have a problem.
Okay. So you can't be using your credit card to go and buy food, essentially.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Razia, you sit with a global view. Africa is your area of specialty. The opposition yesterday, through Musi Maimane, suggested that other African countries are growing and doing better than us, which means there are things that we're not doing well. Is that a fair statement, or what would you say to that?
Well, we really need to understand what is happening in the rest of the region. And Nigeria aside, we are seeing other African countries growing much faster, but off a much smaller base. So for South Africa to grow at 1% a year would be the equivalent of some of its neighboring countries growing at 27% a year, or thereabouts. And that's an important point to grasp. It doesn't mean that there isn't disappointment with the rate of growth that South Africa is achieving for itself, but we do need to pay attention to those starting points. Now, what is ultimately needed? We think we saw a very honest budget being unveiled yesterday, very realistic growth projections, but I'm sure everyone must be thinking, what can be done to stimulate growth? South Africa has now gone beyond the point where it's going to be left to fiscal policy alone, or monetary policy. Global conditions matter, and there really isn't going to be that much room to keep policy ultra-accommodative, which means really trying to support growth. And that means that some of those smaller things, the micro-level reforms that help to unlock activity, that allow people to get on with what they need to do, that ultimately drives greater economic activity, that's what's needed.
All right. Ismail, the finance minister has got a huge balancing act, and he sort of alluded to it at the beginning. There are political realities and also economic realities, and you've got to kind of balance the two. Kusatu's busy saying, Minister, forget about the ratings agencies, just work for the poor, etc., etc. What are your thoughts? I mean, the rating agencies are definitely watching us. Do you think that they would look favorably on what they heard yesterday?
I think that what we find generally is that farmers are the most intuitive economists because they understand market supply and demand. I think that's the perfect gentleman not sitting on my left who's in a perfect position. But as the Minister indicated earlier, it's extremely important that we focus on how we secure a sustainable public finance system in order to establish investment-led growth. So while we take the pain in the short term, it is for medium-term benefit. And, I think South Africa has proven, we've seen again yesterday in the medium-term budget, that there are many opportunities, low-hanging fruit, that we do have in order to sort of stabilize the balance sheet. And I think credit rating agencies are now aware of that. But most importantly, as the Minister indicated, we need to take the pain in the short term. And he coined the phrase active citizenry. I think it's all of our responsibility to join them in helping them make their task easier and making the government actually meet the objectives that we require for our long-term sustainability. So I think the rating agencies are cognizant of that. They do understand that. South Africa, like I said earlier, has a number of opportunities in which we do have significant low-hanging fruit that we can then take advantage of.
All right, okay. I want to get to the tweets and also questions here on the floor. We don't have too much time with Minister. We've got Deputy Minister coming in a little bit later on. But let's go straight to our tables and start at table number 6, where Dion Simons is sitting. And Dion, what's your question to Minister? Or the panel, actually. There's a couple of people here. Dion?
Hi, good morning. I'm from the Southern African Clothing and Textile Workers Union, SACTU. My question to the Minister is, government has claimed that the wage subsidy is a success. Yet Treasury does not know how many of these are new or existing jobs and how many lost their jobs because of the new wage bill. So the question is, when will Treasury know?
Okay, Minister?
I hope by wage subsidy you mean the employment tax incentive. The employment tax incentive was intended to encourage employers to employ young, new entrants. But we further extended it, and that is why we call it the employment tax incentive, not only to focus on youth, but to deal with the constituency out there that is not in employment. The only thing we're doing, we are saying to the employers, if you do employ new people, and there are checks and balances to ensure that the net head count must have increased in order to be able to claim the incentive or tax credit and come end of the financial year. Indeed, it is not possible to put a finger on the number, as you have correctly pointed out, but the fact of the matter is we have actually been able to realize we had anticipated 75,000 jobs. We've seen more in excess of 200,000 jobs since its inception in January. And I think that is where the call also comes for us to work together now to see if there are any shortcomings. And it is for that reason that we, at the moment, made it a temporary measure so that we can then evaluate its successes. And we would want now the labor movement to assist us, because the labor movement, is on the shop floor. They will be able to actually identify exactly those shortcomings, whether indeed there are new people employed, whether these are new entrants, whether the system and the incentive is not being abused. Wow. So we are making progress, and I think the progress we are seeing there actually is positive, and we should build on it.
Paul Claassen tweets saying, we've heard of reductions in government spending before. What is different this time? And we do have one of the largest administrations in the world. Is that going to shrink?
Yeah. We've had these initiatives before, and it is on them that we are building, because we have also realized some benefits out of it. We just didn't put the number, but what we had worked out was in the 8 months, We actually have realized in excess of 500 million rands out of what we had proposed. And it is for that reason that we are saying, let us continue on that path. And when we're talking about, and it is something that, if you want to change people's habits in terms of spending, it's something that you need to work at. Yesterday I made an example that I made an example in reverse, but it's a very true example. If your husband used to do nails and do hair on a weekly basis, maybe it is proper to go back home if you know that you are not in good financial space to say, darling, let's do it on a monthly basis, or do you really have to do your nails? So it's actually it's a change of behavior. Because I thought it would be sexist if I said if your wife does the nails. So this is,
can we change?
And we are making progress. And I must say that in some instances, it is the awareness that you are also being watched that actually helps you behave in a particular way. One of the things we have done, we have said, we're doing expenditure reviews now, where we are going to actually lay bare what is it that we found in each department. This is where you're spending your money, and we think your focus should be here. We have our Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, which will be looking at those reviews. We're working with them as the National Treasury. And the nation also, we should actually be, because at times society itself, we are beneficiaries to some of extravagant government spending. Should we be asking questions even when we are recipients? And business, should we also be asking questions even when we stand to benefit? So it's an exercise that requires all of us to be aware that we are in this space, but also before you ask a question, look at yourself first. What is your role in making sure that we are able to realize those benefits? How much do you enjoy by being at a meeting from 8 o'clock until 6 o'clock because you'll have breakfast there, you'll have lunch there, and you would prefer that meeting to be held in an exotic and plush hotel?
All right, Razia, we've been almost kind of saying good things about Minister, and he's sitting next to us, but I'm going to ask you now, what didn't you hear yesterday?
Okay, well, there was the good news, of course.
Yeah.
Expectations were very bearish, very negative going into the budget, and we saw real measures being put on the table in terms of what would be needed to rein in that budget deficit. But there's still some uncertainty as far as the market is concerned, and this has to do with the level of support that the Treasury may have to provide to state-owned enterprises, Eskom in particular. There's been some thinking out there that maybe the funding gap is as much as 225 billion rand. What we got from the medium-term budget yesterday was potential sales of assets owned by the state amounting to about 20 billion rand. So what I think a lot of people want to know is, well, how far will that go in bridging the gap? We know that there are other options for financing available, but are we looking at a situation where the financial position of Eskom has substantially stabilized? Is that how we should be interpreting it? And perhaps, Minister, that is the question I would put to you.
Yeah. Simple answer is what we are doing to Eskom is actually dealing with the immediate financial situation or the financial health of Eskom in order for Eskom to be able to stand on its feet and be able to go out into the market and borrow. And the package is very simple. It's a package that one looks at getting Eskom for some time. And as a country, we have admitted and acknowledged that we have had cheap electricity. Indeed, I also am the first one to admit that this is not the right time to start, burdening the citizenry with more money. But we need to be realistic. And that is why we're saying Eskom needs to move towards a cost-reflective tariff. And we are pleased that the regulator is beginning to see that. And the regulator was actually very measured in doing that because they first approved the 8%, but it emerged that, and that is why they have what we call the regulatory clearing account. And they were able to see that, look, there is a gap here. And as such, they were able to approve 12.7%. But our task and our responsibility as government is to protect the poor and some of the industries that might be critical. But that's the first part. Cost-reflective tariffs. Eskom must be able to sustain itself so that it doesn't sell electricity at a price lower than the price at which it produces it. The next one is that we need to look at, building, and that's why that equity injection we're talking about. And we also extend it beyond that and say, perhaps we might actually look, depending on how the other interventions perform, we might look at the conversion of the subordinated loan or part of the subordinated loan into equity instead of keeping it as a loan. But beyond that, we're then saying that once Eskom is on its feet, and we need to look at governance issues at Eskom. We also need, the company itself has made its own commitments of what it is going to do in order to realize efficiencies, and also to make sure that it operates as a real state enterprise that has to fulfill its responsibility of providing energy and making sure that the security of energy in the country, but at the same time that runs on a sustainable basis. That's what we want them to do. So it's not like we want to babysit them through the period, but we also are now going to be much sterner and much more rigorous in terms of reporting requirements, which is what I said, on all state-owned companies, and we are looking at them, putting them all under the microscope. It's going to be tough, and not only for us, but it must also be tough for people who are in those jobs, because if you have a board that is not doing its oversight responsibility, those people must be taken to task. But not only taken to task, there must be consequences, including our chief executives, including our executives in general. I think we need to begin to see that happening, where people are doing what they are employed to do, and what people actually get appointed into boards to do. And we need to all exercise our fiduciary duties and otherwise.
All right, we're going to take a quick break after that. Ismail, I want to ask you to ask the question that you didn't get to hear yesterday. And also perhaps just to take this conversation further, selling off non-core assets, is that something that we're going to see a little bit more or not going forward, given the challenges that we're in and the need for cash? All of that still to come. Stay with us.